We're now going to take a look at a technique that we can use in methods that's called overloading. In some programming languages such as Java, we are allowed to have several methods with the same name within a class. Now you might think, well, wait, time out. We just talked about how we can have a name, but we can't declare it within the same area of the same name. So I can't have two names in the same area. But we're saying here with methods that we're allowed to do that? Yes, we are. This is what we call method overloading or overloading a method name. Now, before I explain how we can go about doing this, we needed to define one more thing. We say that two methods have different parameter lists if both methods have a different number of parameters. So they have a different number of parameters, or they have the same number of parameters, but the data types of the parameters in the order must be different in at least one place. So what we say here is that two methods have different parameter lists if either they have a different number of parameters, so maybe one method has 2 parameters and the other one has 3 parameters, or if they have the same number of parameters, then at least one of the corresponding parameters of these lists have different types. So like for example, if they both have 2 parameters, then if one of them has 2 ints and the other one has an int and a double, then they're considered to have different parameter lists. So let's take a look at a couple of examples to illustrate this. So let's say I have 3 methods, method 1, method 2, and method 3. Both method 1 and method 2 have different parameter lists. This is because method 1 has 1 parameter and method 2 has 2 parameters. Now method 2 and method 3 have the same parameter lists. They have the same number of parameters, both of them have 2, and the types are in the same order. They both have an integer parameter as the first one and a double parameter as a second one, as the second parameter. And it doesn't matter that the parameter names themselves are different just because method 2 has x and y and method 3 has a and b. That doesn't matter. If they have the same number of parameters and the corresponding parameters are the same types, then we say that those two methods have the same parameter lists. Now that we understand that, we can take a look at how we actually overload a method. So to accomplish this, we can have two methods with the same name, but they must have different parameter lists. Okay, let me repeat that. We overload two methods when they both have the exact same name, but their parameter lists are different. So let me give you an example. Let's say I want to overload the method xyz. So here are 3 different methods. They all have the same name, but they have different parameter lists because the first one has 0 parameters, the other 2 have 2 parameters, so we know that the first method is different. And notice that the parameter lists are different for the second and third different definitions of method xyz, because the second one has an int and then a double, and the third one has a double and an int. So all 3 of these are perfectly valid in the same class. So the whole point here is we can declare these, we can have these different methods, and when I call them, the question is going to be, well, which one do we use? Well, if a method name is overloaded, the parameter list will determine which method to use. So if I call method xyz, the arguments that I pass will decide which method I use. So if I pass an integer then a double, then I'm going to call the second version of method xyz. If I pass no parameters, I'm going to use the first version of method xyz. If I pass a double and then an int, then I'm going to use the third version.